Hey, what's up, everybody? So my name is AJ Richards, and quick background for those that don't know, and then I'll get right into this. I was raised in a family that has a history to agriculture, fifth generation ranchers. They established homesteaded a community on the Arizona Strip in 1916, and they've been working the land in this area, southern Utah, northern Arizona, excuse me, since then. So I have the experience of growing up, participating, listening, and watching my family do that for a living. Now, I is what you would call a city slicker of the cousins. In other words, my family were not directly involved in ranching. When I was younger, that used to bother me because I really appreciated their lifestyle and I wanted to participate in that, but it wasn't where I was born into. But then I moved to Phoenix, Arizona, lived there for 11 years, got connected to the urban environment, into the city and so forth. I never liked it there. I'm a rural guy at heart. So it was tough to live there, but I got to understand the culture that exists in the cities, and also started to see the disconnect between rural and urban environments and where our food comes from in the stores in the big cities, and how few people understand where the meat they are buying is actually coming from. A lot of times there'll be a sticker that says US. And the reality is that beef came from some other country. So while we're exporting our beef and other countries are importing their beef, we're creating all these carbon emissions around food supply chain. And the culprit of these decisions and the routes and the methods that this is happening falls on the shoulders of the USDA. They're the ones who get to make the rules of how things operate in agriculture. So the fact that we're harping on the cows and the emissions that they put off as the cause for, climate change and global warming and all of the carbon in the atmosphere, and not looking at the fact that we have the ability to raise all the beef we need in the US sustainably for Americans and not have to import beef from out of the country. And by doing so, we would have to significantly increase the number of head of cattle raised in the US, but when done holistically or regeneratively, will actually stop the drought and the desertification happening in the West, which is a problem in and of itself. So we do need more ruminant animals. That's a conversation or a topic for another time. That was an understanding I became aware of, is that the urban environments are totally disconnected with how all this works. And yet the local farmers and ranchers are struggling to put food on their own table, to keep the lights on, so to speak, or to maintain their herds, because they're jumping through so many hoops on how to raise those animals in the US. What's interesting about that is the countries they're buying beef from and shipping to us from, they're not following the same regulations that are causing so many issues for our American ranchers. So lots of issues in the agriculture space. What I've identified being the most primary issue with all of this is that disconnect between rural and urban environments. People just don't understand. So one of the things I'm committed to doing is to try to bring that connection together, to break down the barrier between rural and urban, so we can support one another, become sustainable, create a better environment, and mitigate drought and reverse desertification, because it's all possible if we support one another. Ranchers support urban environments with healthy, regeneratively raised, nutrient-dense protein, give the animal an incredible life that will serve a purpose. Their rumen, their gut, their dung and their feces will fertilize the deserts and create them and make them to be green again, so we don't have droughts and then flash floods and so forth. So what I'm going to do today is I want to read an article, and I haven't read this version yet, but it comes on the heels of an announcement that the USDA just invested $10 million over 5 years into the Tufts University for the study of cellular agriculture. In other words, growing your protein in a petri dish, completely disconnected and disassociated from nature. That alone, shouldn't have to read the rest of the article, but I feel like I have to, because there's a lack of education in in this world, in our society, about where our food comes from and what's good and bad. We've just become disconnected from it. At least I would say the majority of the population. So I'm going to read an article from Veg News or Veg News. I already read the one put out by a magazine called Beef. And of course, they are completely against this. And I was going to do the recording on that, reading that one, but I thought maybe we should just do this and try it out on vegnews.com and give you a live reaction from myself as I'm reading this. So let's get started. The United States Department of Agriculture, the USDA, just made its first investment in lab-grown meat in the lab-grown meat industry. The government agency will award $10 million over the course of 5 years to Tufts University to establish the National Institute for Cellular Agriculture, a flagship American cultivated protein research center. The project aims to create a more resilient food system by developing outreach extensions and education for the next generation of professionals in the field of agriculture, which revolves around the use of a small amount of animal cells to create real meat and other animal proteins, replacing the environmentally damaging practice of raising and slaughtering animals for food. So first of all, they completely skipped over how they're going to actually create a resilient food system. The only resiliency here is the man that creates it and gets the money for it, all of those investors, all the shareholders in that company. The resiliency is their profits, because now we only have access to that. They're not talking about resiliency at all in our environments or our human body, the nutrients that we need from natural sources, not cellular agriculture. And to add real meat in here is already completely deceptive. So the environmentally damaging practice of raising and slaughtering animals for food. There's no basis to that. Now, of course, they're writing this argument and appealing to their particular audience, but they're completely false. We must have ruminating animals to reverse climate change and desertification, but they need to be managed holistically. And actually, we need a lot more of them. In a desert environment, the only moisture to break down like leaves and branches and sticks and things like that, the only moisture throughout the year primarily comes from ruminating animals, or that's where it should come from, because otherwise we only get it when it rains, and it doesn't rain very often. And that's all part of the breakdown in the ecosystem. That's why it's not happening. USDA's historic funding for National Institute for Cellular Agriculture is an important advancement for cultivated meat research and science. Appropriations Committee Chair Representative Rosa DeLauro, she's a Democrat in Connecticut, said in a statement, "I am pleased that USDA's leadership continues to recognize the important role these technologies can play in combating climate change and adding much needed resilience to our food system." This is not combating climate change. When they set up the process to get the ingredients they need to make this fake meat, it will be a monoculture. Monoculture is the cause for our global warming in the way those practices are done, because they raise the crop, they level the field, they release all of the carbon emissions that those plants pulled into the soil from the atmosphere, and then they usually leave it bare. Now, even if they cover it, all of the, you're so worried about sentient beings, the slaughtering of animals, but yet, do you know how many animals, insects, and sentient beings are destroyed when you mass clear thousands of acres of land to grow monocrop for sustainable practices like this? And the fact that the USDA is supporting this when they are supposed to be supporting agriculture, they have completely turned their back, in my opinion, on the people that they were initially set up to serve. And they have actually done that for years. So no surprise here if you're in the agriculture industry. They've been doing that for 2 ranchers in the US forever. That's why the 4 major packing plants in the US that have all the control are actually not even US run companies, but they control almost everything. The research will take place primarily at the Tufts School of Engineering in Massachusetts and will be led by Tufts University professor David Kaplan, a renowned cultivated meat expert who will be working with researchers from Virginia Tech, Virginia State, University of California, Davis, MIT, and University of Massachusetts, Boston. While traditional agriculture accounts for 14.5 to 16.5% of anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions globally, cellular agriculture's carbon footprint is far lower as it does not rely on feeding, maintaining, transporting, slaughtering, and processing billions of animals every year. Now, we already covered the transporting. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but look up how much emissions that one container ship in the ocean puts off and how many cars that compares to. Well, if you grow it locally, everybody in the country could buy protein from their local rancher. We reduce transportation emissions there. Feeding. I agree with feeding. We should be holistically and rotationally grazing our animals as much as possible. They should not be put in a CAFO. We shouldn't be separating our food from its food, because then we separate the rumen from the land that needs it to regenerate and replenish the food or the nutrients they're pulling out of it. So yes, we do need to change the feeding. And if we do, we'll be pulling carbon out of the air at a higher volume than the cow pies that are spread throughout. And by the way, those cow pies spread throughout, cow pie, if you don't know, is cow shit, cow poop. When it gets spread out, beetles, dung beetles, flies, things like that will push that into the ground right away, creating some biodiversity in that soil, which is necessary. So animal dung is not a bad thing. We need it in the right context. I don't know why they have slaughtering in here. They're just throwing that in there for more flair. Processing of billions of animals every year. That, again, is just some wordplay to sensationalize the devastation of the animal industry. And I'm telling you, we need more. This is a major step forward on our work to tackle climate change, infuse resiliency into our food system, and build a stronger, more sustainable future, said U.S. Representative Catherine Clark, Democrat of Massachusetts. I am thrilled that this historic grant will be housed in the 5th District of Tufts University, a true leader in cultivated meat research, and am eager to see this transformative research brought to life. Not much to say there. Lab-grown meat in the U.S. The USDA historic investment will help to support critical research necessary to rapidly scale cell-based meat production as a major obstacle in getting the novel meat to market is knocking down its price. So, because they can produce it so cheaply, they're going to put ranchers out of business because it's cheaper to buy cheap lab-grown chicken and beef than it is to buy naturally raised. So in other words, they're going to reduce the demand by selling something cheaper. What they are not talking about is the impact on the human body when this is what's consumed. In addition, who is the one that is going to be consuming it? Impoverished communities that can't afford more expensive proteins. If we increase the number of cattle, not only are we increasing the environmental resiliency to drought, we're returning local water cycles because more grass leads to more transpiration. That's water sweating from the plant leaves, creating more storm cells locally that creates a water cycle. Also, we can then reduce the price of meat because we're able to raise more cattle on that same piece of land. So the rancher's still making money. He just has more volume. So more people have access to better raised, nutrient-dense protein. The USDA's historic investment will help support critical research necessary to rapidly scale cell-based meat production as a major obstacle in getting the novel meat to market and knocking down the price. Currently, a variety of cellular agriculture and aquaculture companies are working in the U.S. to create lab-grown beef to cell-based lobster and every animal product in between. Sounds like the future I want to be a part of. In May, the company raised $170 million to fund the proliferation of its cell-based meat with the aim of making traditionally raised chicken obsolete. Funding alternative protein development. The $10 million grant to establish the National Institute for Cellular Agriculture is part of the USDA's larger $146 million investment in sustainable agriculture research. While private investors, including actors Leonardo DiCaprio and Ashton Kutcher, have made sizable investments in alternative protein development, public investments in this industry, particularly in the US, have lagged far behind. People, if this worries you, you need to share this information. It doesn't have to be this video, but you need to share this information as far and wide as you can, or this will be the reality. They just told us they're having a hard time getting everybody to buy into it. We know that. Only 3% of the country is actually vegan or vegetarian. GFI outlined this glaring funding gap in data it released last month that public investment for alternative protein research and development, which rivals clean energy and climate change mitigation potential, was just $55 million in 2020, bringing the all-time public investment total to $112 million. That's good news. Let's keep it that way. By comparison, public investment for clean energy R&D was $27 billion in 2020, a whopping 490 times more than the public investment for alternative protein research and development in 2020, 240 times the total public funds ever invested in the industry. So this is all good news. They're having a hard time getting funding. Now, people, if you want to donate to something, donate to people that are working to restore land, regenerative agriculture, or holistic management the natural way. There are nonprofits popping up all over the place. So a lot of people are getting behind this other movement, this alternative movement, which there's some miracles that are happening. I'm telling you, some of the stuff you would see possible to restore land using agriculture in a holistic way would really kind of give you hope for our future. What it takes human beings to destroy over hundreds and even thousands of years, nature will restore with our help in less than 5. It's unbelievable. I'm going to attach some links below this video. If you're willing to invest the time in this, it will inspire you on what's possible. These are videos that I came across over the years of my research that changed my mindset from being doom and gloom, we're screwed, we've already screwed up the planet further than we can, to some magnificent miracles that people are getting involved in different countries around the world and completely restoring their environments while increasing the number of animals on their properties, because that's necessary, that then in turn provides upcycled nutrients. In other words, an animal eats a piece of grass, through the miracle of how they're designed, they upcycle that into, because that's their food, into their meat that we then can respectfully consume so that we can continue to live and thrive as human beings. So thanks for listening. There's a lot more to this. I'm sure I'm going to be doing more of these, whether you guys like them or not. So you're welcome to participate, but the information has to be put out there. We need to rally the voices to make sure our food is taken care of, and the people that are willing to do that work are able to continue to do that work for our families to be able to be happy, healthy, thriving humans. Thanks for listening.